All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Dawson Blank. I'm the Executive Director at the Minnesota Youth Athletic Services. A lot of familiar faces, names that are coming across here. It's great to see the youth basketball community unified. We've got over 100 people that have joined already. I know this was last minute and we apologize, but as the members of the task force understand, along with the board of advisors, this has been quite a process and we still don't have a complete answer, so to speak, and I will go through that in a minute. But I guess first and foremost, there was a commitment made on November 18th when we found out that we were going to have a pause in youth basketball. And all of the people that were on that call that evening, they had said that we need to come together as one youth basketball community, and we need to figure out how to do that by creating universal protocols, requirements, recommendations that are going to be used across the board. So that following Wednesday, we held a board of advisors meeting. There was a task force created. There were 8 members of the task force, actually 9 members of the task force that were asked to be a part of this. A lot of it had to do with their past experience within their own associations and the best practices that they created. And I'm extremely thankful and blessed that we've had them a part of this process because they've been awesome to work with. And you guys, all that are part of the youth basketball community, should be proud of them and all the effort that they put into this to make it happen. Tonight, we've got a couple of them that are going to speak to you. Mr. Randy Olson from Chaska Area Youth Basketball Association. He's the president, has been the president for a long time there. Megan Melvey, the president of Matamidi Youth Basketball. And then Patrick Miller, who is the director of player relations for Wayzata Girls Basketball. His idea around this comprehensive COVID preparedness guide that him and Megan worked on extensively, that will kind of be the catalyst for all of you that are acting as the COVID compliance managers that you will utilize. So I'm just going to go through our agenda this evening. And again, we are going to try to get through this as quick as possible. Like I told you at the beginning, we have had a lot of conversation, a lot of phone calls, Zoom meetings, correspondence with task force members, with board of advisors, with Commissioner Tomes, with members of the Department of Health, with other state organization leaders like Minnesota Hockey, Minnesota State High School League, and other people within statewide leadership. We still are waiting to hear back from the Department of Health and Commissioner Tomes on our manual. They've been going through it. They're very pleased with it. So that is the delay right now on why that has not been disseminated out to all of you. So that should be coming soon. Our hope is that it will be distributed out by tomorrow or at the latest Christmas Eve. And I will go through in a sec that there are some potential other things coming, additional information that you all will probably want to know tomorrow from Governor Walz. So we're going to go through just a quick return to play update, an MYBA return to participation task force acknowledgement that Mr. Olson, Randy Olson, will talk through. And then I will just really briefly go through kind of the 10,000-foot view of the manual, COVID-19 return to participation pledge association requirements, And then Jeremy will go through what your duties are as the COVID compliance manager. He'll talk about these neat new features that have been added to the MYBA portal that all of you will be able to utilize for the duration of the rest of this 2020-2021 traveling basketball season that we'll have left. And then Patrick Miller and Megan Melby will talk through this comprehensive preparedness guide for all of you. So we're going to use the PowerPoint here as kind of a way to keep us on track. And we want to try to be out of here by 8 o'clock. At the end, I would encourage you as we go ahead, and I believe you can go in the chat and ask questions. This is not a webinar featured Zoom. You can ask the questions. We will try to do our best tonight to answer some. There might be questions that you ask that we can't give you 100% the answer right now, because we have to be very careful on some things related to the manual and things like that, because we want to make sure that we're hearing directly from the sources before we can get everything out to you as a whole. So please bear with us, but no matter what, we will make sure that if we don't answer those questions tonight, please wait until we can get something out to you in a Q&A to everybody, because the questions you're asking tonight are going to be the same for other people that are on leadership within boards as well. All right, so here's an update really quick. As you all know, we are still on pause until January 4th. It was made very clear that on that date, January 4th, that practice could resume. They also made it very apparent that with the combination of Executive Order 99 and Executive Order 103, that every organization needs to make sure that they have their preparedness plan in place. And I would like to commend almost everybody on this call tonight. You did your due diligence and you did what you could as parent volunteers on boards to come up with your preparedness plan, and you all did a great job. The other thing that is very apparent is that they are looking for there to be training provided to youth athletes, coaches, and everybody, and event staff of the plan to prevent COVID-19 transmission. Now, I compare that to before becoming executive director, I worked a lot in the space of trusted coaches, and there is a concussion law that you all know within the state since 2011. There is a part of that law that talks about providing information to all participants. The coaches need to complete the certification, and that education or training can be done with information available on your website or through other things that you can pass along to them. I will recommend U.S. Council for Athletes Health has a great mechanism through education and a Game Day Ready app, along with an attendance tracker that you could utilize as a board if you choose to moving forward. There is a cost to it, but that is something that you could look at. It provides education to all the parents and the athlete, and then you can do the tracking by having them answer the assessment, and then the attendance is there too. Those two main things are the exact reason why on November 18th by the bigger group, and then that week of November 21st, why the board of advisors felt it was extremely important that we are proactive. The last thing that the staff at MYAS or any of you wanted to do is for us just to wait until we unpaused and resumed participation. So we, again, over the last 4 weeks, we really tried to get to that point. And basically at the beginning of this week and late last week, we had everything ready to rock and roll. Like I said, we are all working directly with Commissioner Tomes, with MDH, governor's staff for proper guidance for return to participation. Couple other things to note. A return to participation timeline is imminent and should be announced tomorrow. Okay, so meaning return to competition, we know that there is going to be answers for you before Christmas on when that's going to happen. I can't give you the exact date, but you may know that from your high school teams that you maybe have heard that there is a date out there, and it's probably going to fall in line close to what they're talking about. The goal yesterday on a call that I was on with leaders from High School League Minnesota Hockey, let's try to maintain as much consistency as possible. So that was the big thing. Other things to keep in mind, other mitigation strategies such as spectators and mask face coverings will be addressed. So again, I can't give you too much information there, but please know that there may be some additional things that end up happening related to that to ensure that we can get back to competition. Okay. Next, all right, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Randy Olson really quick. This is just some information for you on what our goals were as an MYS staff and the return to play or return to participation task force. We also were very blessed to have Dr. Craig Perry on board. He's with the U.S. Council for Athletes Health. He's been with the High School League for 20 years with their eligibility, and he's now the VP with that group, and he has done a great job because he helped with return to play for colleges, universities, conferences like Pac-12 and Big Ten, and he's working with the high school league, so some of the verbiage that is being used is very consistent with what the high school league is doing. So we are very excited that he had obviously the wherewithal to put this all into a easy to read manual, along with other things like what you had maybe seen with the table of contents that was put together and the checklist that was put together. But I just want to allow one of our task force members to just talk to all of you. So Randy, thanks for being on, and it's all yours.
Yep, great. Thanks, Dawson. And I just want to emphasize something Dawson said earlier, that at the individual association level, there was a lot of good work going on. And everybody should be commended for getting the season off the ground and doing their best to ensure compliance with what was out there. But what was lacking, and the reason why the return to play task force was created, was there wasn't a universal, a standard set of guidelines and requirements for folks to comply with. So we set off, as Dawson mentioned, on November 21st. And created the Return to Participation Task Force, and with the common goal to build a roadmap for a healthy return to participation and ensure compliance across the MYBA member associations, and ensure that players, coaches, parents, and guardians would all comply with that roadmap going forward. So to get us going on development of that manual that you'll get a view into today, we developed a set of guidelines and set of guiding principles really for the development of that return to participation manual. And first and foremost, really a set of standards. So universal COVID-19 policies and procedures to be implemented as requirements and recommendations by MYBA associations. All associations must agree to 100% compliance with those requirements. And then really comply with a pledge, a participation pledge that covers all participants, parents, and coaches for 100% compliance with reporting of COVID-19 information to MYS and MDH. Non-compliant associations will not be allowed to participate in other MYBA association-sponsored basketball tournaments or participate in the grade state championships or rec state championships at the end of the season. And then in terms of reporting, one of the pieces of feedback we got from the state is we need to get more compliant with reporting. So each association will report on a 2-week basis, and we'll ensure compliance with those reporting guidelines as well. So we're getting ready to launch into the pieces of the manual. There's really 4 parts to that manual that you'll get a view into today. And that's overall the MYBA checklist, which I find very valuable. So it's a framework for the return to sports for COVID-19. The detail around that is contained in the MYBA Return to Participation Manual. As Dawson mentioned, Patrick and Megan did a great job of putting together this MYBA Comprehensive COVID Preparedness Guide that you're going to have a view into today. And then consolidated within that document is a set of best practices across MDH, CDC, NCAA, and with the help of Craig Perry from the U.S. Council for Athletes Health. It's really a really usable guide for the kind of the path forward. And the hope is here we can remove the variables and the unknowns so that we can all comply. We can get the kids back in the court. We can get back to playing here as soon as possible. So with that, Dawson, unless there's anything else you'd like me to cover, I think I'll turn it back to you.
No, that was fabulous. Thank you very much, Randy. I appreciate you for setting that up. I think he basically said kind of a 10,000-foot view of what it is. And I want everybody to understand that this is the Minnesota Youth Basketball Alliance Return to Participation Manual. This is not the MYS Return to Participation Manual. We as MYS staff felt it was important that we made sure that we got to this point. So we got people that obviously have utilized best practices from their associations and also feedback from a lot of other people within the youth basketball community. And we wanted to make sure to be that driving force to assist in it. And again, the people that were on the board of the task force did a great job. And they were very helpful. And they actually, Megan and Patrick, they created a large portion of what is going to be used, especially by you all as the COVID compliance managers. So again, keep in mind, this was not about MYS. This was about you as youth basketball associations, and more importantly, the people that we are serving, the participants, to try to get back to a healthy and safe return to play. And the path that we saw was making sure that we came together in a way that we were unifying everything that was moving forward, everything that was done moving forward. And so I think that you will all be pleased, and please know that there's going to be just some steps that you're going to all have to take. And I'm again, like Randy said, I said earlier, all of you, the majority of you did that anyway, or almost all of you. So it's a matter of just sharpening that pencil, and we're all doing it the same way, and we're moving forward. So again, the thing that I am the most excited about that you'll hear in a few minutes is the MYBA Comprehensive COVID Preparedness Guide. I mean, this is something that we saw was the most difficult for everybody, even with the guidance that was out there. This provides a way for a step-by-step process for every association, and specifically the COVID compliance manager, that they can do the same thing as somebody else in a different association as far as case reporting and the protocol that goes around goes with that. So you will hear about that more here coming up. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy Innes, Associate Director at MYS, and he's been awesome over the last 6 to 8 months, because he's been kind of the driving force in putting a lot of the details within the portal of the MYBA on the MYS website. So Jeremy, go ahead.
Thanks, Dawson. I want to thank all the association leaders out there for getting their information updated within the MYBA portal, getting those teams entered, the rosters, all of that, and especially getting the COVID compliance manager set up too. That we've been poking you to do for the last little while. So thank you for getting that done. If you're one of the few associations that haven't got that assigned yet, please log in there and get that taken care of as soon as possible, as we're going to be sending out a lot of important information in the very near future. COVID compliance manager, basically, you know, they're going to be the COVID compliance liaison with your association between MYAS and also other associations. They're going to make sure that your association is fostering compliance with the MYBA Return to Participation Manual. Follow the steps for reporting when it comes to positive cases and who that information needs to be shared with. And I just want to reiterate that this is just kind of a brief overview. We're going to have the complete and detailed information in the Return to Participation Manual that will be posted here soon. Communicate with other COVID compliance managers regarding exposures and compliance. And then a big thing is submit bi-weekly data to the MYBA COVID-19 tracker, which would be located inside the portal. I'll touch on a little bit more information about the tracker here in a couple more slides. All right, so hopefully by now everybody knows how to access the portal, but just want to run through that again. So if you go to myas.org, click on the login button, and then you can enter your login credentials there. If you get access, it'll say MYBA portal in the upper left-hand corner, which is different than just your regular coaching account. And one thing that we've recently added too is that as admins, people with access to the MYBA portal, you can now give other users access to the portal as well. The main thing is that those individuals must have an MYAS account before you're able to attach them. They can easily create one by going to myas.org. Instead of clicking on or submitting their login credentials, they click on create an MYAS account. Once they do that, then you'll be able to find them and give them access to the MYBA portal for your association. Next slide, please, Das. All right, so once you log in, we're gonna have a few, we've got a new tab in there. We've got some stuff posted already, COVID-19 tab. The pledge, that's gonna be, once we get the return to participation manual released, then we're gonna activate that pledge. And both Dawson and Randy hit on some of the key components of the pledge earlier, but that's where you're officially agreeing to everything that's outlined in there. The tracker, that's our COVID-19 tracker, and we're asking the COVID compliance managers to submit data for their association every 14 days. Basically, and we're just looking for numbers. We're not looking for names or anything like that. And I'll hit on some more information about the tracker in a little bit. You'll also see it under the COVID-19 tab. There's a button there for CCM contacts. That's a way for COVID compliance managers from one association, gives them the ability to communicate with the CCMs from other associations to report exposures and that sort of thing. Next slide, Das. All right, here's some more detailed information about the tracker. There's going to be some ranges in there, some different periods. The first period that we're going to have is January 4th through the 17th. That corresponds with the first day that youth sports are allowed to start practicing again. And we want everybody to submit that data within 5 days after that period expires. So in this example, submission date would be January 22nd. You need to submit by January 22nd. We realized that, within that first period, January 4th through the 17th, maybe somebody goes and takes a test on the 17th, and it might take a few days to get those results back. So hopefully by the 17th, we've got all that information, and the CCMs can post that information inside the tracker. There's going to be 5 questions that we're asking. Number of players that reported positive, number of coaches that reported positive, and each of those for tests that were taken inside the selected period. So if they took the test within that January 4th through 17th time period, even if we got the result on, say, January 18th, we still want that reported in that January 4th through the 17th time period. The third question, number of players that started a quarantine, number of coaches that started a quarantine, and then that 5th one should actually say teams that started a quarantine. If there were, due to exposures, the whole team had to sit out for a period of time, regardless if it's practices or games, if the whole team had to sit out, that's where you would input that information for question 5. There'll be a lot more detailed information coming out regarding all those components and what's in the portal as soon as we get that finalized.
Perfect.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate that. So again, like Jeremy said, this is something that you guys are all seeing right now, and there probably are going to be questions that you're going to have. again, this is something that is very fluid, and we are going to get stuff out as quickly as possible. So a lot of the questions may be answered coming up. So again, I'd like to give a shout out and props to Megan Melvey, who is the president of MYBA basketball, and Patrick Miller, who is the director of player relations for Wayzata girls basketball. And he had the opportunity to actually meet a couple times with deputy commissioner of the MDH, along with other members of MDH and Commissioner Tomes, to kind of show them what they had done within their own association and how it could work for all associations across the state if this was implemented. Because again, their biggest fear coming out of this, if we went back to participation, was the fact that there was not truly the best reporting that was happening and the consistency of it. And so that's again why why this guide was created, and it was because of Patrick and Megan. So Megan, if you want to start, thanks for being on tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Dawson. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So thanks everybody. Like Dawson said, and Randy reiterated, what we're going to talk about tonight is nothing you haven't heard before. Everybody's been doing their best to kind of get through this on their own prior to the pause. And really our goal here is to go through and be able to make sure that everybody's as consistent as possible, and the guide that we put together is really to help you to have a tool to pull everything into one place as you kind of walk through the process when you're dealing with positive cases and close contacts. So I'll talk through some of these slides. You'll see the 6 steps, and we'll talk about each of these in some detail. And then on the right side of the slides, you'll see the tabs in the preparedness guide that really relate to that topic. So after we go through the slides, then Patrick is going to talk us through and show you some of those slides in the workbook itself. So when we kind of high level, when we think about, oh, sorry, go back one more. When we think high level about when we have a positive case, there's kind of 6 steps, right? So first of all, we get through, the responsibilities of someone to notify your association of that case. Then there are notifications and actions to be taken by the CCM, the COVID's compliance manager, for that positive case or close contact. Then we work on contact tracing and figuring out who close contacts to that positive case might be. There are some steps to be taken as it relates to the close contacts. And then we'll talk about the record keeping details within your association in terms of keeping track of all of this, as well as Jeremy already touched on the case metrics to be reported through the dashboard. Go ahead and as we look at those, we'll get to the Excel file and talk about those tabs. So first of all, thinking about what are the responsibilities of the participant in your program if they have a positive case of COVID-19 or they have been close contact exposed. When we look at that, kind of as a prerequisite to that parent being able to submit to your association, what we would recommend is that each association creates a form that can be submitted. And after talking through with the task force, the recommendation is to use one single form that can be used for symptoms, positive cases, and close contact exposures, not separate forms for each item. That form, some associations have done it through like a Sport Engine registration as like a $0 registration. People can submit their information. Others have used a survey site like SurveyMonkey, but a couple critical things is that the participant be able to easily submit it to notify their own association, and that the information they submit is kept private, meaning only the COVID team within your association has access to it, and they don't see other people's submissions like if it was a Google Doc. So moving on, the action steps for those participants, they need to notify the CCM from their association, and it's also their responsibility to notify their school district as well as MDH through that sports email address. There was a question asked earlier, close contacts do not need to report themselves to MDH, just positive cases. If you would go on to the next one, Jeremy, thanks. Okay, so the next step, when there is a positive case, what are the steps that the CCM is going to take? First one is to talk to the school district where that player attends. So this is, again, people just within your own program. Ideally, the parent should have notified school, but the CCM is going to let them know this particular case is part of the basketball program. You can also give a reminder to parents that they should be notifying the Department of Health through that sports email address. And then what you'll do is figure out the quarantine period for that positive case. So Patrick will walk you through, there's a flow chart, there's a decision tree we created. There are some example scenarios in that Excel file that you can use to determine what the right quarantine is given the situation. And then you'll communicate that back to the positive case being that player or coach in your program. Patrick will show you in the Excel file, there are some standard messages that you can copy and paste right out of that document to use as a template when you're providing that information to people. Okay, third one. So this is really, it should really be 2A and 2B because they really happen concurrently. But when you hear about that positive case, in addition to determining what happens with that individual, it also is really critical that the contact tracing and identification of close contacts occurs so that we really can stop the chain of COVID-19. Within your own association, that CCM is going to determine who those close contacts are through basketball. We'll show you kind of our working definition of close contact within youth basketball in the Excel file. There's an asterisk here because we're still waiting for approval from MDH that is in fact the definition they want to work from. If there's any changes, we'll obviously update this. When you're considering that close contact, whether it's player to player, player to coach, and so on, we've also got information included there related to the timing and considering, you know, the onset of symptoms when that occurs relative to the contact with the other individuals, as well as considering the timing of when that COVID-19 test was taken, are both really important. That 48-hour time frame is relevant kind of in a couple different ways, and Patrick can show you that in the file. To really aid in the contact tracing, there are a couple of additional things one require and the other recommend. The first is that coaches have to keep track of attendance of every player and every coach at every practice and game. There are some sports apps you can use for that. I know some people use TeamSnap, Sport Engine, or others. We've also got a tab in the Excel file that can be used if you want to keep that offline. But again, it's a coach responsibility to keep that for their team. And then we also just recommend that within this Excel file that you download or save in a copy of your team schedule so that you've got a quick access as you're looking at who you might need to notify when there's a when there's a positive case and determining that close contact. Go ahead and go to the next one, Jeremy. Okay, so similar to the starting point, right? We had to figure out those actions and notifications of the positive case. Once we've determined who the close contacts are, next we need to determine the actions and notifications for those close contacts. Within your own association, you are going to notify those close contacts directly, determining what their quarantine requirement is, as well as notifying the school district of the players in your association that they are a close contact and need to quarantine. When you're doing those notifications, you will be providing the child's name to their school district. But when you're notifying the COVID compliance manager from another association due to an opposing team close contact, you would not be providing the player's name. So from a privacy perspective, names only go to MDH and to the positive case or close contact's own school district. One of the things that I know was a question in those early tournaments in November is when there's a positive case and you need to notify another team, do you do that directly by contacting the association, or do you do that through the hosting tournament site? And we didn't have a great way to contact each other directly prior to the work that was done here. So what will happen now moving forward is if you need to reach out to the COVID compliance manager from another association, you will have their contact information through the portal. So you will reach out to them directly. You will also notify the hosting location just so they have awareness that there was a positive case in their facility, and so that they can notify the ref scheduler who was on the courts where that positive case played. But the notification to other associations will be from one CCM to the other CCM. And so again, that's figuring out what those actions and notifications are. Keep going and I'll try to see if I'll get to questions here in a minute. When we when we talk about the record keeping details, there's really kind of two aspects to this. The first one is really the burden of keeping track of all of the details about the cases and close contacts within your own program. You know, as Patrick and I sat down to work on this, it was pretty funny because we actually had very similar giant Excel files where we were trying to keep track of all this data. And that case tracking tab in the Excel file is intended to be just that, to give you a place to keep track of those details. Again, that information really limited to just your COVID team within your association to keep the privacy of those individuals, but really important to have a log where you've got a clear way to keep track of the cases, who comes off quarantine when, who is close contact to whom, and so on. So Patrick will show you that case tracking tab. But this is the part, like I said, lots of detail with names and so on, but very limited in terms of who has access to it. And then the last part, if you go on, Jeremy, the case metrics is what Jeremy went through. So I won't read all the sub bullets on the left here, but like he said, every other week you'll be submitting those numbers only for cases, close contact, and then in total number of teams that are fully in quarantine. And that reporting goes in through the portal. There is a tab in the workbook. It's called MYBA Reporting that Patrick can show you. And that is just a place where you can compile your numbers in one place. So when you go into the portal, it's just a matter of quick type in 5 numbers, not dig through your whole detailed case tracker to figure it out. So again, just a tool that's available to you to try to simplify things. So that's kind of what we put together. Patrick or Jeremy, do you want to switch to the Excel file and Patrick can kind of go through some of those tabs?
Hey, Dawson, you're muted.
Is there anything else, Patrick, on the presentation that you need? I gave you co-host rights, so you can share it if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, let me get that open then.
Yeah, while Patrick's pulling that open, the summary of all this really is that we wanted to create kind of a one-stop shop where all of us can keep track of things within our own association. So that Excel file, the intention is that you save a copy of it to your computer. You can use the templates, you can modify things, record your own data, but just to kind of have a one-stop shop to keep track of everything in one place. Were there questions in the chat here that I can try to do?
Jeremy, you want to ask Megan a couple of them that she may.
Let's see. Okay, so does
There's one that popped up recently. Does the COVID compliance manager contact MDH sports team email with positive cases, or do parents do that?
Parents should be doing that on behalf of their child, or coaches on behalf of themselves. That's not what was happening this fall. I know, at least in my case, we, the association leaders, were contacting MDH, but the reality is that parents should be contacting MDH on behalf of their child.
Thank you. As far as the chat goes, I think we're all caught up.
Perfect. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So as Megan alluded to, we've been working quite a while on this, and it was very ironic that our sheets were very similar. But what we did, and really when it really all started back when we talked with Commissioner Tomes about what has worked well for our association, what we thought could be helpful to share with other associations to get us all on a common platform to get the kids back to playing games and at least practices. So what we wanted to do was pan all this together, put it into one nice package, because as Megan walked through those slides with a lot of information, there's one thing that came out of that. There's a lot of information and there's a lot to take in and digest. So we wanted to make it a one-stop shop for you in one packet. Each association will receive this document. You'll be able to modify it on your own, use it as how you please. If you like columns in a certain order, when it comes down to the case trackings, feel free to adjust. But what we wanted to make this as easy as possible for everybody to be compliant. If we're compliant, the kids can keep playing and the games can continue on, and that's the end goal. So in the first page, we just got an introductory tab. It's going to give you a summary of each of the tabs that are out there. Now, there are some that are highlighted in yellow. Those primarily are ones that you're going to want to be able to edit. You're going to be using constantly. You're going to be entering data and information into them along the way. And I'm going to go through this quickly. If there's any questions, feel free to pop it up in the chat as well. This next page was really the return to play checklist. And what we wanted to do here is just how to organize and structure each association, CCM, and the teams that are all working together at each association, right? For us at WGBA, we have 4 COVID task force members because it was a much larger task than one person can handle on their own. So we put in a lot of detail in here as how to set it up, how to get it posted onto your website, what kind of communication do you have to have, the MDH notification, who's going to do that for your association. It's all things basically that you need to consider on how you want to be able to set it up on your own association's program and plan. The main sheet in here that most every CCM we use, and it felt like I was using this daily, if not hourly at one point in time, is our case tracking. And so in here, this is where you're going to keep all the metadata that you're going to need to require to be able to track, record, and report out and share information as needed back to MYBA. So in here, we just put 3 examples on associated symptoms, a positive COVID case, and a close contact. Within there, we'll have a description. We have all these fields basically to fill out: the first date of symptoms, the close contact date, the date when the test was taken, the date the test was received, all that information. When it boils down to it, you'll be able to use this along the way. And really what it allows you to do is see when play should be suspended through, and really tracking, did you communicate that with the player? Did you also inform the coach as well? Was there anybody else that needed to be informed? Was the impact for just the player only or for the team? And here you'll have a good solid base to report on and have a really good accurate tracker along the way. Any questions with that? I'll pause real quick. I don't know if I can see chat. So Dawson, I may need you to help me out here.
One question that's popped up a couple times in the chat is just clarifying who is responsible for reporting what information to who, as far as parents, to other coaches, to MYS through the tracker. Maybe you could explain that a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. So maybe we can just go to here. So first, this is going to be the MYBA reporting. So this is what Jeremy referred to. Every 2 weeks, you'll have to submit this by that 5-day period afterwards of that week ending. And what we did here is you'll put your association's name in these cells over here, and then you'll have reporting buckets. And as Megan alluded to, it'll be really as simple as, we had 1 person here, 5 in this, 5 coaches, and then there's 10 players in quarantine. You'll simply enter that information, and that's all you will need to submit. No names, nothing confidential, just report that out to them. When it comes to the communication, why don't we jump back to the decision tree real quick? And this is where it gets a little bit fun. Megan, feel free to jump in too.
Can you enlarge your screen?
I can. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So we gave instructions up front so everybody can understand how and what to do. And this is where it was a little bit hard. When we looked at, let's just go, sorry, I'm going to jump around a little bit. But if you go to the MDH decision tree, right, this is what is posted on the Minnesota Department of Health's website, right? And sometimes we realize that, following a diagram along is not going to be best for everybody, right? They're not going to know exactly how to go through all the procedures and looping around through all of this as well. So what we tried to do is simplify it down for everybody. So when there was a category for an individual affected, they could have 1 less common symptom, 1 or more, or 2 or multiple of the less common. There could be a positive test, a close contact. And then association, this was one that was just added in here. An association has informed us by another CCM that there was an opponent that we came in contact with as well. What we tried to outline everything here is what has to happen for each person. And so this is saying if a player and or a coach was in contact, these are the impacted outcomes that you would have to communicate out, right? So if it's just, let's say an easy one, a less common symptom, the player or coach, whoever has that symptom, has to stay home until symptoms improve for 24 hours. And there is no impact to the coach, the team, the opponent. No communication needs to take place, right? When we figure out those action items, and that's over here, and again, this is a little bit hard to show on the screen, but hopefully you all can see it. Here are those action items, Dawson, as what we need to do. When do you need to notify MDH? When do you need to have MYBA notification? And basically also, when do you need to notify the school? And so hopefully this hand out for everybody what we need to explain and when to do it. Megan, anything to add there?
No, so Patrick, I would just say the starting point, like he said at the top, kind of tells you which row to start in, and then you just track it across to the right in terms of how is the individual who the case is about is column B. Other people who are related to that person are the yellow columns in C through F. And then, like you said, actions and notifications are further to the right. So hopefully a way to kind of make it a little bit clearer cut in each of those different situations. What do you do?
Exactly. Perfect.
Patrick and Megan, maybe talk about it. There was a question that's saying, even if we aren't submitting names, we're personally compiling spreadsheets containing a lot of private data. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, and so for that, there is going to be data that is going to be compiled. The procedure that we handled for our association was I was the only one as the CCM for WGBA. I was the only one with access to this information. My COVID task force would receive some of the details, but not all of them. The reason why we would share that was ensuring that we were following the correct protocol. We wanted to make a uniform and a team decision instead of one individual making all the decisions for every single player in our association. So we did have our task force, but nobody outside of that task force would have any access to this information. It would be shared and saved locally. And that's why we didn't promote use of, let's say, a Google Doc where that can be edited and viewed by many people if given access to.
Yep, thank you, Patrick. Megan, do you want to talk about the question from Beth? Because we talked a lot about this with when we are informed of a positive case, we are following 14-day quarantine or the newer CDC guidelines that allow for 7 to 10 days.
Yeah, so I think we'll make sure MDH doesn't overrule us here, but the new guidelines with the 7 to 10 days is what we're planning on. I think a couple key things to be aware of with the 7-day is that you have to have had a negative test result, and that test has to have been taken at least 5 days after the exposure, and it has to be a PCR test. So somebody can't go in and say, well, I was exposed yesterday, I got a test today, and it was a rapid test. Well, that's not good enough. So make sure people at least should be informed that 7 days requires the test to be 5 days after the exposure or longer, and it has to be the PCR test. So if they're not tested.
And for those who don't know who
yeah.
the PCR test, because I had to look it up myself, it's the nasal swab one versus the spit one.
Okay. All right, Patrick, you can keep going here. We'll continue to monitor the questions here.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So just jumping back a little bit, in here we defined the close contact information. So this was one that we wanted to make sure that there was a consistent approach along what is being defined for MYBA affiliated associations and how we're going to move forward and get back to the court. We wanted to make sure that close contact was defined consistently. There's a lot of grayness, and that's when we talked to Commissioner Tomes. That was the biggest flaw that I put out there, is there was a lot of grayness, a lot of flow charts, and people just interpreting them their own ways. So in a practice, close contact is defined as all team members and coaches are close contact to each other. We, in our own association, had questions of, well, how do we know somebody was within? If we err on the side of caution, it'll allow our season to be prolonged. While it is unfortunate, now that the new guidelines of the 7 to 10 days means you might only miss one tournament weekend instead of 2 with the 14. But it is to prolong the season and make sure we are all consistent. In a game, we outlined it as all players on both teams are close contact to each other. Coaches are close contact to the players on their own team. coaches are not close contact to opposing teams, players, and coaches are not close contact to the opposing team's coaches. And in addition, well, where does it stop, right? And that's where Megan and I had several conversations about that, but we also wanted to put out here that referees were not considered close contact to players or coaches.
And Dawson, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think MDH, we still need them to bless this, correct? So this is what we proposed, but we're waiting for their guidance that this is in fact adopted, right?
Yes, they have had it since last Friday. Yep.
Exactly.
Maybe Patrick or Megan, how will the data be used that is submitted? Is it so we can report to MDH state or to who? What will be shared with group in terms of data analysis?
Through the dashboard, I assume that question is referring to.
Yep.
And so COVID compliance managers will be able to see their own data. MYAS and U.S. Council for Athletes Health staff will have the ability to roll up the data across associations. You know, I think the intent is so that the data is available for MDH should they request it. I don't know if there's a specific plan to share it with them on a regular basis if it's not requested, but really point being that having that data collected so that we have information should they want to see, you know, what do we have in terms of youth basketball for cases and close contacts, it'll be available versus a scramble and really no way to go backwards in time. So I think having it available for MDH is the purpose. Jeremy, I don't know if you want to say any more about that in terms of the specifics.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And that's one of the things that we're waiting on from MDH is to see what they want us to do with that information, whether it is submit it periodically after every 2-week period, or if it's just something, you know, make sure it's available upon request.
And I think just to add to that, we wanted as a youth basketball community to have that available so we could show one way or the other as far as the cases that are out there, because prior to the pause, we didn't have that. There was no true understanding if youth basketball was a spreader. We all know that that probably isn't the case, but that's something else that we feel is important because there are other statewide organizations that do have something like that at least started or they had in place a little bit.
The biggest thing that Commissioner Tomes and MDH said was consistency and adoption of a plan, making sure that multiple associations were adhering to that plan and that there was reporting available around the numbers to prove out those points that Dawson just said. And that's what this whole program that we're putting together here on the preparedness plan is all about, is ensuring that we have the right pieces in place to make sure that we are tracking and handling cases appropriately and that we do have the numbers to back it up. So here's the MDH. I will point this out. We didn't put the link in here to the MDH site. This decision tree has updated. I will note that I believe it's still listed as 14 days, even though the governor said that MDH will adhere to that 7 to 10. We're still waiting on that, and the latest version out there still only says 14 days instead of that 7 to 10 day period. But we put that in as a reference. We already talked about the reporting on here. So here's a couple of the other things. And this is sort of what I utilized when I was starting off and communicating out to players. Up here, we made letters that basically will tell you if there was a close contact, that you want to send a letter to the player, parent, and or guardian. It's a template. And by inserting, you know, that player, parent's names in the selected fields, obviously modifying the dates in here, we left those as examples, but it really outlines how long that play needs to be suspended for. It makes it very clear and direct to that player and parent so they are aware. It allows them the link to the MDH website as well, so they have that as a reference, so they hopefully can adhere to those rules and policies that are put out there as well, not just the communication coming from the CCM. And then it does inform them and within our COVID policy, and we believe that's pretty much a standard that the coach needs to be made aware that a player is not going to be at practice, right, and or a game. So we put that blurb in there as well. But what the nice thing is if you have a case that's coming in, you can come in, you could highlight over that information, copy and paste that into an email, and you're done. And so we have the close contact, the positive test. We have a message to the coach basically saying, hey, player A is not going to be there. And really continuing on, how do we want to provide information to MDH? So I believe there was a question, do we have to do it for close contacts? Nope, it's just positive cases. And here's that message from the CCM to the MDH. Basically, this is all the information they need. And you would fill this information out and let them know. And then additional message of how to communicate to the team if they were a close contact, and then how to communicate out to another CCM and or tournament host if your team potentially had a contact with an opponent at a tournament. So all there in one stop shop for you to be able to copy and paste that out. All right, I know we're moving along here.
Yep.
Any questions?
Well, there are some, and I think we can answer a few more, but I think this does give us the ability to Megan, I know, and some other members of task force had created some FAQs as well, and I think this will give us the opportunity to take some of these and add them on if we don't get to the answers tonight, because I think there's some that, again, we want to get to the health professionals too. So Mr. Jamie Murphy or Jane Griffith or Cynthia Kenyon, who are the state epidemiologists that we have worked with, I think some of them might be better answered by them anyway. But we will continue to monitor this. We'll make sure to capture all these questions if we do not answer your question, and we will get them to you. We'll get it out to everybody. Okay. So Patrick, are you done kind of going through the guide right now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's the other things of just example scenarios that you can use, a master schedule, and really an attendance tracker. And besides that, everything else is just really self-explanatory in the file. So yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick. Megan or Patrick, if you want to look in the chat while I'm getting the end of this presentation together.
I was just going to comment, I've seen a number of questions about who's notifying MDH, and I think that's one of the things we're still looking for some verification from them. I know prior to the pause, all of us association leaders were doing that. We've gotten some communication that parents should be doing that on behalf of their child. I think we need to understand if we're supposed to still do it as well, to say they're part of a youth basketball association, in addition to the parent notifying just about the case as a whole. So I saw a bunch of questions there, and I think we're still looking to get fully solid answer from MDH on that.
Okay, Jeremy, thank you for that, Megan. Is there anything else from your perspective that you can answer based off of some of those questions?
I see a question here about out-of-state teams playing our tournaments. I think that's going to be addressed in the announcement coming here pretty soon. It's been a very common question that we've been getting at MYS, and we haven't received concrete response.
Yeah, the only recommendation is that it's from the state is that it's discouraged. I would, as association leaders, I would potentially address that within a policy within your own association, just to mitigate the risk that I believe that when we have basically 2 months left potentially to participate in basketball, that we try to keep it as local as possible. And I would encourage all of you to establish something within your own association. But again, it's out there right now, and it's discouraged by the state, and that's the one thing that we know right now.
Dawson, let me address another one here that's in the chat related to the timing of when a player tests positive. And that also in in the guide, we talk about that 48-hour time frame, and it is absolutely true that there can be cases where a teammate tests positive. If their test was taken more than 48 hours after their last contact with the team, assuming they don't have symptoms, then the team would not be considered close contact. But if that test is within the 48 hours, or if they develop symptoms within 48 hours and then are tested after that, then the rest of the team would be considered close contact.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Jason, we understand that, and that's something else that we're going to have to determine. Western Wisconsin communities, that's also been the question raised on, they should just be eligible for our grade state championships as well. So that's something else that needs to be addressed, and we know that it needs to be addressed soon. I don't know if MYS is going to come out and say they're not allowed. I think that we do need to address for those border associations that have Wisconsin communities or local associations that are participating in their tournaments. There may need to be some type of affiliate pledge that is signed, because what we're asking is that all MYBA member associations are adhering to that this pledge and this commitment for the rest of the season. And because of that, we don't want teams that decide or that choose not to participate in any of our events, in your own association tournament, in any of our MYS sponsored tournaments. And to answer Bernie's question, yeah, we know that there are a lot of associations out there that maybe are greater Minnesota communities that don't participate in many metro tournaments at all, with the exception of maybe our grade state. And that's something that they're going to have to choose to do if they want to have their teams participate in something at the end of the year. We did really, Jeremy did a great job within our membership, where we basically, anything after that certain initial membership fee, that we eliminated any fees, because we wanted to get as many associations into this as possible. Because again, we felt that the quickest path to a return was getting as many of the associations that are part of the MYBA on board. And right now we are getting close to 140 associations that are part of the MYBA. We've said it a lot that this is the first year of the Minnesota Youth Basketball Alliance. It was something that was a long time coming. And this year was, I guess, an opportune time to try to, again, keep everybody unified as much as possible. And again, this play is simply to make sure we get our kids back to playing. That is ultimately what this is. And this creates this unified voice that has been kind of missing within youth basketball. And we're excited about it. So again, I think and I don't know, Megan, if you want to talk about this really quick, there's a comment about you know, that sports get blamed for spreading COVID. We all know that based on what we've seen with the data, that that's not the case. And I think that's another reason why we feel it's important to have that data available for MDH moving forward. Patrick or Megan, do you want to comment on that?
I don't have a lot of details there, but I believe that the case count metrics are coming from the testing data, and that what their MDH is collecting from us or from parents is more related to contact tracing and so on and so forth. So it's really about the transparency in terms of where things are happening, but I don't think what we're sending is counting toward the case metrics specifically, but I don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And from the contact and responses that I've received from MDH have really been along the lines of making sure that we have a plan and that they're a resource if necessary, and they're not necessarily using the reported cases from us for anything else besides that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Jeremy, anything else you want to say about the MYBA member associations and the associations you've worked with recently? Thing about outstate schools?
Yeah, so as Dawson mentioned, we've been making a big push. The goal with the MYBA is to get every association in the state of Minnesota to join. And we made some great progress with that. But especially, you know, once we do get to outstate Minnesota, You know, we may not have their contacts, or you know, they may be shut down. We didn't know about it. It's not on their radar, but we're continuing to try and get those associations to join. If any of you have, you know, say an association signed up for your tournament, and they're not a MYBA member, please encourage them to join, or please forward, you know, the MYBA information onto them, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that they have and get them to join. I do want to mention that when a MYBA association agrees to the pledge, that is going to be noted on the MYBA page of our MYAS website. So if you go to that page and click on member associations, it'll list all the member associations, but the associations that agreed to the pledge will have a little indication next to their association name as well.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap this up. And again, if we did not answer your question specifically tonight, we'll make sure that it gets answered. I just want to note too that the MYS office is closed. There are limited people putting in hours, but Jeremy and I are committed to trying to make sure to get as much information disseminated out prior to the 24th, 25th, and this coming weekend. So the next steps. Our goal is that we will have the return to participation manual and the comprehensive preparedness guide that was shown by Patrick tonight out into your hands within the next 24 to 36 hours. Okay, that's our goal. I think that things will get elevated a little bit here because we know that the Christmas is coming and they want to get information out. So I think that's going to be very important that this happens. We know that it's going to be a quick turnaround for everybody, with literally you get back on Sunday night or Monday, you know, you got a meeting possibly scheduled. We're going to have a meeting on December 30th. So we can get everything out to all of you, and then we can kind of go through some details. And in the meantime, then we will ask for additional questions as we move towards January 4th, and also the known timeline that will take place here probably tomorrow, as far as when we know competition will begin. Okay, if you have any questions, you can email myself or Jeremy, but we do have a specific email that we're going to use related to all of this stuff with our return to participation, and it's MYBA compliance@myas.org. So again, I would like to thank all of you for your time and dedication to youth basketball. I would like to again especially thank the MYS MYBA Basketball Board of Advisors, along with the task force, for all the work they put in. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Megan, for your work tonight and all the work you've done. Everybody have a safe and blessed holiday with your family, and we will get through this together one day at a time. So with that being said, again, we will answer all the questions in the next day or two. This will also be out through the MYBA portal. It'll be out there on YouTube if you need others within your board to see it. It's been recording, so hopefully that all works out. You know, that happens sometimes, but hopefully it'll all work out. But again, thank you. Thank you for your dedication to youth basketball, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays to you.